Welcome, everybody. We are back for Q2 of 2024, and we were doing a pre-show, and no one talked about my shirt. I actually have they gave me a shirt, so I'm like the real deal now. I have a shirt. But we provide these quarterly updates on Star Wars CCG to try to give some transparency to the market. So everything we're referencing is in the show notes. If you click that view more, you can look at the spreadsheets, you can look at the averages. This is intended so you can get a good price on stuff. Sellers can sell stuff and provide some transparency to the market, which is good for everybody. So I have Luke, Greg, and Mark. We're going to talk sealed. We're going to talk graded. We're going to talk sets, some singles. But the first thing we're going to talk about is probably the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is Star Wars Unlimited. Is this game destroying our beloved game? I'll go first just with my take. I think it's made it really hard to find this stuff on Star Wars CCG on eBay now. Like the search engine is kind of messed up where everything comes up as Star Wars Unlimited. But I think there's been a lot of people just interested in Star Wars card games and sort of like stumbling across Star Wars CCG as a result and be like, oh, this isn't weird art. This is like cool movie stills. And so I think it's actually a good thing because there's generally resurgence happening at CCGs. And I think rising tides, brings up all the boats or however that goes. But that's my positive take. Luke, what about you?
Yeah, someone who looks at the eBay searches a lot. I've kind of like gotten accustomed to sort of just, mentally filtering unlimited stuff out. And maybe I don't recognize or see it as much anymore. I'll talk about this during my update, but like sealed stuff for CCG is actually pretty far down. And I do wonder if unlimited is having an impact on that market. If people are gravitating towards, hey, there's new product available, new sealed stuff to go for rather than old stuff. Yeah, definitely there's a lot of interest around that, which I love. It's good to see, but I do wonder if that's something that's impacting the market.
Yeah, I mean, I think for so many people, the natural on ramp to a game is not buying a set or a collection; it's buying a booster box, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how everybody usually experiences a CCG that's brand new. And I think Star Wars CCG is just like, no, the sealed stuff is collectors. Like, don't open sealed packs. It's a terrible, whatever ROI there. But okay, what about you, Greg? What do you think? You're also deep in the eBay data.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe like Luke, I mentally filter now, and so I've kind of noticed it less the last couple months, but I don't know if that means that it's showing up any less.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the point you made was interesting about if people are unhappy with the art, and then they, as they're doing their searches, they see this other game pop up with like cool movie stills, whether that's driving an interest. I have no idea. With a bit of a spoiler warning before I do my thing, for those who think the sky is falling on the CCG market, the data is not reflecting that, at least not my data.
All right, what about Mark? What do you think from a graded collect standing point? It seems like the graded community, which I'll just say you kind of helped found, is really like found a lot, like found its step and grown pretty tremendously over the last couple of years.
Yeah, no, it's been fun, with JP and the crew growing it. And I think with Unlimited, if anything, I think it's healthier in the long term. Because one of the things with Star Wars CCG, right? And I mean, I guess you had the Star Wars TCG and you had, what was it, the previous FFG card game.
Destiny.
There wasn't really a very collectible modern product, right? That you have with, say, Magic the Gathering or Pokemon or all the other CCGs. So to have a modern product that has cards that people are looking to, pull and get exciting pulls and get them graded, I think is a great asset. And like you said earlier, a rising tide, I think in the long run will rise all the boats. So I think it is a good thing. It's a healthy thing to have a modern product that people like to open and grade.
Yeah, one quick thing on Star Wars Unlimited is it's just been amazing the number of like 9s and 10s graded cards floating around because it turns out modern CCGs have higher print quality, shipping methods are better. In general, they don't grade super poorly like Premiere or A New Hope or whatever, where like the 1994 printer was like kind of crappy, running out of ink, and like the whatever paper slicers were bad. So it's interesting from a graded perspective, almost like a inflation of grades due to just like higher quality printing techniques, right? So I think that's the whole separate discussion, but I feel like a Star Wars Unlimited 9 PSA 9 doesn't really do much for me, whereas like Star Wars CC1, I'm like, oh, that's pretty hard to get. Like stuff doesn't grade well. But anyways, let's move into the data. We got Greg up first. Greg, you always put together such cool slides. I actually stolen this as a thumbnail before, so I might do that again.
Yeah, and I see Luke's been stealing them too. So I'm gonna have to up my game next time. Really blow you all out of the water. All right, so the short of it is average sale price is up and sales volume's down. Now let me give you, sorry, I gotta access. Okay, so the stats are up a bit, nothing too significant at 4% from Q1 to Q2. So they're up a little bit. Although I will say, like, the sum of the average sale price of these sets is up about 20% from the 2023 averages. So, you know, up a little bit over Q1, but up quite a bit over 2023. The sum of the average price of all of these sets shown here, this is the black border sets, no AI, no foils. It's about $5,000 these days. Volume's down Q2 to Q1 about 25%, but it's worth noting that Q1 was like the best quarter volume-wise that Star Wars CCG has had in like 2 years. So the volume being down about 25%, I take to be not so significant in light of that. More details. So, and Dagobah, Cloud City, Endor, Coruscant, they're all down. Premier, New Hope, Hoth, Special Edition, and Thief Palace are all up. The rest of them are even. A New Hope and Hoth are up a lot. A New Hope has been averaging like $190, which is really crazy high for a New Hope, and Hoth is up around $220. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts about that, why that might be happening. Maybe it's just a blip. But you know, those are quite significant increases for those two sets.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I do think there's like an iconicness where people come back and collect the game. If they're coming back, they're going to start with Premiere and A New Hope and Hoth and collect the stuff they know. But it's also possible that, like, I think those sets were down for a long time, and so prices just got so low that people are just like, hey, this is actually pretty cheap for a complete set. I mean, I remember buying a New Hope set for like 2 years ago for $100. So it's like pretty amazing to think it's almost at 200 on average.
Yeah, I mean, these are by far the highest either of these two sets have ever been. So yeah, anyway, Ref 3, I should say, is even, but at $350, I think we mentioned this last time, is pretty low for that as a set. And the last couple sales of it have been around the $300 point, which kind of blows me away given how well the singles still sell for. So if you're selling sets, probably not a good idea to sell Ref 3, just sell the singles. If you're buying, Ref 3 seems like a good proposition for you given how pricey those singles are.
You know, just talking about Ref 3 prices reminds me of all the people that were speculating on Boba Fett Bounty Hunter as a card when the Boba Fett show was coming out. It's like, this card, like, it turns out the show sucked. So, like, it didn't really do anything for the iconicness of the card. But I just remember people like buying up Boba Fett Bounty Hunters.
Yeah, they were going for crazy amounts for a little while. I mean, they're still obviously very expensive.
Yeah, it's like
and
$40,
maybe the most expensive from the set. Yeah. Other than like Force Push, although I don't know what that's at these days. So that's the sets. So anyway, generally speaking, things are looking good with set sales. Again, volume down, but average sale prices are up, even though the sets that are down are not down very significantly. Singles are a different story. The single market, other than this Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight, is really taken a hit in the last quarter. So Luke is up about 15%, which I should say Luke was down quite a bit for some months. So this is really bringing Luke back up to what is, I think, a reasonable price for the LSJK. Palpatine's down a little bit, about 5%, but nothing too significant. But all of the ultra rares that I track have all taken a hit. The Luke Invader from Reflections 1 down 4% and 12% respectively. The Ref 2 ultra rare foils are either even or taken a hit. Lord Vader is actually selling for below Mara Jade at the moment. Although I should just flag that like the sample sizes for all the ultra rares, other than the Luke and the Emp, are quite small. But still, that seems surprisingly low for Vader to be inching close to $100.
Out of curiosity, why do you think the sample size is lower? Like in theory, these are all printed the same amount, right? Like there's the same amount of all of these. Obviously, Luke and Emperor are more iconic, but like Vader's very iconic. Like there should be the same amount of Vaders out there as Emperors and Lukes. Like it's just why do you think there's more of these selling? Like by like a scale of 3 or something?
Yeah, I don't have a great answer. I'd be interested if the other guys do. I mean, Luke and Emp have just been like the two, singles, the workhorses of the singles market forever. And yeah, the rest of the ultra rares across all the different sets, I get, kind of a few data points, every quarter, but nothing too significant. While with the Luke and the Emp, I always have, even with the foils, at least 10 or so, and with the non-foils, like dozens sometimes.
It could also just be that people don't even know these are ultra rares, right? It's like P59. People don't relate. It's like in a card pile and like, oh, I'm just going through it. This is a destroyer. Like maybe they're not even jumping out in the same way like these two cards are. So I don't know.
We did have a couple of graded Lord Vader sales this last quarter, and one Mara Jade, which were pretty. Those are pretty well selling graded cards. They infrequently come up, but they grade highly. Go for a premium for sure. So that might have some Fed effect. For example, Amara Jade PSA 9 went for $500 this last quarter. Actually, that's wrong. That's 2021. Excuse me. That went for, gosh, I need to look at my spreadsheet a little bit more. Yeah, there hasn't been as much activity for sure, because that was, there was a BGS 9 that went for 200. Yeah, not a ton of movement of volume. You're right.
I mean, it's worth noting that even if there were, a bunch of graded Vader and Mara Jade sales that kind of explain the smaller sample size for mine, there's also a bunch of, Luke and Emp graded sales, I take it. So the fact that the Luke and Emp of the ultra rares just, outsell the rest of them by so much is an interesting question. And, I don't know. They're iconic. Back in the day, before anyone cared about really the ultra rares and the way they do now, it was still, Luke and Emp. Although back then the foils and the non-foils were selling for pretty much the same price. Foils were even a little cheaper back then, the ultra rares. And with the Reflections 3, they're all, again, the P59 is the only one that's not down, although that's because there weren't any sales in the previous quarter. So there was one sale this past quarter for P59 at 300. So I don't know what's with the ultra rare foils. Is it unlimited? Is it grading? It's not clear, but all of the ultra rares other than Luke are down, which interestingly is not the story for the AIs. The AIs are all up. Feed quite a bit. The Feed AIs are up about 20%. The Coruscant AIs are only 3%, but still a small increase. Again, these are still small sample sizes, but it's interesting that these are doing well in the face of the other, the ultra rares, the other singles that I track doing so poorly.
Just to return really quickly to Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight foil, there's only been one graded sale this year on that card, and it was a PSA 6. Oh. So we are way down on that as well. It went for 232. Yes, it's also not a ton of volume there, even for Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight.
I'm realizing I should have mentioned this before, but it'd be really interesting to think about whether Episode 1 sets are going to have an increase because of the re-release of Phantom Menace, right? Like people are just thinking about Episode 1. We celebrated, was it 25 years? I know it was in theaters, or is it 25 or 20? Whatever it was.
25.
It was in theaters like nearby. Like people are just thinking about this stuff again. Like, I'll just say that I probably went 15 years of my life without thinking about Boss Nass, right? And that's like, oh, Boss Nass, like, and so just like little like memory jogs that I'm wondering if like the re-release also could coincide with some people like, oh, maybe I'll buy some of this stuff. Markets work in funny ways.
So I don't know, but yeah. So long story short, sets are doing quite well. really at some of the highest averages they've ever been. And ultra rare's not doing quite so well. And the AI is having a bit of a resurgence after having like a kind of rough 2023. They've had quite a good 2024, the AIs.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the set overview here, Greg. That's all from you?
That's everything. Yep.
All right. Let's switch over to Luke and Mark here. We're going to talk about sealed. We're going to talk about graded a little bit and just an overview of where we're at in those categories. So I'm going to hand it over to Luke here.
All right, great. Happy to take it away. So we're actually recording this on June 30th. So we have perfect data all the way through the end of Q2. I ran a couple of different price points. I did the comparison to exactly 1 year ago. And then I also did the comparison to this last Q1. And so the overall conclusion, as you can see here, sales prices continue to trend down for sealed. The average price last quarter was $363. It's now $340 on some less sales as well, but more than Q2 of last year. And we're significantly down year over year for sealed, $146, as you can see that top number on Q2 2023 to this quarter. And so, yes, sales prices are definitely down. You'll see that in the next slide. That is definitely reflected. So to steal Greg's image, I'm going to say it's more consistency, Greg's image throughout our
I
slide.
love it. It's all I've ever hoped and dreamed for.
Great. So we'll start with what's flat, Daaba and Hoth boxes as compared to year over year. I'm going to also show you the quarter over quarter, which is a bit different, but year over year, Daaba and Hoth about 5% plus or minus. Lots of other stuff are down, as you can see across the board there. And there's a few that are up, Death Star 2, Tatooine, Deep Palace, and Reflections 2. However, as Greg alluded to, most of those are on like very few data points. And so whether or not that's reality, if we actually had true liquidity in the market and more data points, I'm not sure. But for sure, like most of the main sets that people collect or people would get boxes are down. And so I'll show you that in the next slide, the actual numbers. So I put arrows there on the right. The far right side is percentage change year over year. So this is Q2 this year as compared to Q2 of last year. So Premier Limited down by 10, A New Hope down by 16, Hoth about flat. But I want you to look, guys, look at the number, just the minuses. Like Daaba and Hoth pretty flat, but like Cloud City way down. We're at 287 as compared to 345 before. The sets that are up, again, the ones that are like near the end of the Decipher era. So Death Star 2, but if you look at like the second column there, it says 1,620. That's on one sale, right? So like we don't have a ton of good data there, but I did include it because I thought, hey, this is noteworthy. Tatooine had one sale in this quarter as well. So like, yes, it's up. It says it's up 17%. But that's compared to 2 sales last time. These are just so infrequently available. The stuff that is very frequently available, if you look at the top line, 27 boxes of Premier Limited boosters were sold in Q2 as compared to 30 last year at this time. And that's down 10%. So like, again, the overall numbers of like a lot of boxes being sold, those are all down pretty heavily. Reflections as well. You can see there at the bottom. We did have one pretty strong Reflections 2 sale year over year. But yeah, curious for anyone's takeaway on this data year over year.
I mean, I'll hop in first and I'll maybe pass it over to Greg here. But I'm looking at this list and I'm just thinking, what would I buy for this price? A special edition, I would absolutely buy it for $500. So like, there's some stuff on here that, you know, even me as somebody who's a pretty big collector, like it seems like maybe we're doing too much retracing here. And I'm looking like Jabba's Palace. I still don't know if I ever want a box of Jabba's Palace. Like I have one box and I don't really have any interest in picking more up, but there's some stuff on here that I think is getting pretty low in price. But I'm so surprised by just Premier consistently. I think if we had the sum of everything else, it might equal Premier sales. Yeah. Right. Like from a volume standpoint. Just like Premier just sells, and it's kind of amazing because maybe it's also the graded impact of people ripping it for.
I mean, they just produce so much of that, right? Like there's just so much floating out there too.
Yeah. It seems like Hoth and A New Hope would probably, I don't know the exact numbers, but like they weren't produced as much, but they're still widely produced, and that's like a quarter of the sales. But Greg, what do you think here?
I don't. Here's a couple of stray thoughts that have with no semblance of order. But one, looking at Tatooine at $500 is really interesting. I mean, I remember when all of the sealed the boxes, the booster boxes really started to increase. Tatooine really lagged, and I kind of still remember it at like sitting at like $150 for a box as the other boxes are going up. Seeing it at 500 is quite interesting. And I gotta say with Endor, although I hate to say this about a game that I love, but it's actually like I've always thought Endor is like overpriced as a set and for the boxes, and I think this is in a certain sense almost reflecting what it should be a bit more than it has been historically. Not that I want to see any boxes do poorly.
Yeah, I mean, Endor packs are just so rough. Like the best card you can pull is probably the foils, which are basically impossible to pull. But I guess you could get maybe a $60 General Solo foil is the best card, right? And the chances of that are like 1 in 1,000. But like for a pack to be $30, it's like a pretty bad, like compared to Reflections 3, where like you could pull ultra rare foil that's $400 plus premium cards. Like there's lots of goodies to pull there, whereas Endor is like pretty rough. There's a lot of $1 rares in Endor.
Yeah. Luke, is there no Ref 3 data?
There was, I mean, it's so hard because it's like 1-to-1. Let me just look really quickly on my sheet here for Ref 3 for this last. Actually, no, I do have Ref 3. There was one data point, and I'm going to talk about this actually coming up in a later slide, where we had a box sold for 2,100. And that was wildly low, so low that I reached out to the seller on eBay and I was like, I just want to make sure, is that actually what it sold for? And the seller wrote back to me and said, yes, it is, because I was really motivated by time. I wanted to make some quick cash. Didn't really, this is a fair offer for me. I took it and I was like, cool, thanks for sharing. That was really, really low, 2,100. But I'm going to talk about this. I mean, this last quarter had so many boxes sell at like at least 3-year lows that I've been tracking. These like just from various different sets. And so Reflections 3 is one of them. If I compare that to last year really quickly, let me look. I mean, those just so rarely come out. Last year, there were a few around 3,000, 3,200. So it was about a discount of $1,000 basically that the person got for jumping on it quickly, I guess.
Let me pose a hypothesis there. I think collectibles a lot of times can be viewed as the free money. It's like break in case of emergency funding, right? It's like, oh, my car broke down, I'm going to sell my box, my Endor box, right? And it's way easier to sell one single asset that is contained in a box, you stick in a box, you mail, rather than a binder of cards. We might need to find 6 different sellers for different singles or lots of cards. Like the amount of work that goes into selling a box is a lot easier than listing out 75 different singles in one eBay post or selling it as lots. It's just way more liquid, perhaps, than like sets of a lot of other stuff, right? And so those sets tend to maybe be a little more methodical in their sales, a little less like, oh crap, my van broke down, I need to sell this, right?
That's a super interesting point, Matt, because that's definitely what happened with one of the Endor boxes. See how those 3 there? One sold for $290 this last quarter. And I reached out to that seller and was like, hey, just want to make sure that this is the correct price. And he was like, yeah, this is like my parents or something. Like I was gifted this and I was just kind of get rid of it. And it was like mislabeled. It wasn't actually, it was like, I put it on the sheet, but like, it was just not a good title. It was $290, buy it now. And the guy just completely mispriced it. He didn't know what he had. He was just like, all right, that's about $300 and cool. So that definitely brought the price overall down on Endor. I mean, not including that probably would have jumped.
Yeah. So it's just interesting because I think that these are so much easier to sell than random binders. And they're the closest thing you have to liquid and sort of the collecting market, I think, besides slabs, which are even a little more liquid. You have to find your market for it.
Yeah. Mark, anything on this before we move on?
No, just I mean, there could be a lot of reasons for it. I don't know. I feel like we've been in a few years of feeling like the economy is doing, who knows what exactly. So I think part of it might be a reflection of that as well. And then as well, the later boxes are more premium ones, so maybe it's except the Reflections one went down too. But I was gonna say maybe it's people want the premium boxes and they're sort of going for those. But yeah, I don't know. It is interesting. I guess we'll just have to see how it continues to evolve. Oh, sorry, alarm.
All right, let's move on.
Half the viewers probably with that.
Let's move on to the next slide, which is our quarter, quarter over quarter. So this is quarter one of this year as compared to quarter two. So we didn't do this on the last quarter update, and I was just curious whether or not people wanted it. And we had a conversation behind the scenes, and we're like, yeah, let's just throw this in. It was a little bit extra work, but I thought people might be interested in like what's currently happening now this year. So that one that is for sure up in terms of sealed boxes is Daaba. Like we have pretty consistent data. Daaba, for whatever reason, is doing really well. The others are down, with the exception of plus or minus 5%. Premier, there's just so much volume on Premier. I would just really doubt that quarter over quarter we're ever going to see a drop of more than 5%. There's just so much of that product out there. But New Hope, Hoth, Cloud City, all about plus or minus 5. And the rest, as you can see, they're all dropped. So if you go to the next slide, I'll show you the actual numbers on that. So looking at Daaba, right, we're at 11% growth quarter over quarter. And it's not like the first quarter had 4 boxes sold. Second quarter had 5. So right, we have a few data points here to say that Daaba has grown. I don't have a good reason for that, but I'd be curious on your take. I also thought it's just really interesting to see, Cloud City at 287. We broke the $300 barrier there for Cloud City. And then, Jabba's Palace continues to go down 12% quarter over quarter. Just a lot of red there for sure. Although we did have that Reflections 2 sale at the bottom, which again, there's so few of those, so it has a dramatic effect on the market whenever those sale. But yeah, curious on people's take on why Daaba randomly is the one that's our winner here.
Forgive me for saying this, but Daaba is such a crappy set. It is probably the crappiest set on here, and so I don't understand it. And I'm like trying to think: is it like an anniversary of something? Is it like a no reason comes to mind. I guess it is. I think it's 60 packs in there at least. So it is a bigger box.
I mean, is it the Bounty Hunters? Is it Executor? Is it Yoda? I mean, people chasing a graded 10 Yoda, which is not out there yet. We don't have a single PSA 10 Daaba limited. I don't know.
Yeah.
The singles hypothesis is interesting. Might make sense of the fact that Daaba as a set from my slides is down. So in terms of like the set sales, the average price is down. So it's certainly not people ripping open those packs looking to get sets, trying to put together sets. Yeah. So that is interesting that the box is up and the set is down.
I do think there's this increase happening as people get into graded and they realize that this game, like 20 years is just a long time for cards to be sitting, and it's really hard to actually find near mint or mint cards for grading. And the clearest way to do it is to open a pack. Like I just sold a box of Premier with a guy who wants to open it to chase a Vader, because if you can grade a 10 Vader, that's a huge jackpot for him. So, all right, let's go to the next one here. I think we got a couple more, and then we'll have a few discussion questions.
I'll just breeze through this one. This is sort of just like the minor stuff, like that is more infrequently out there. I did mention last time around that Third Anthology seemed to be doing really well, and I don't even have any data on that. There's no Third Anthology sales this last time to be able to compare that. But out of the anthologies, Third Anthology seems to be the one that has been doing consistently the best. However, there's no sales data in quarter 2 for that. But you can see, I mean, if you're wanting to get a Premier introductory 2-player set or ESB 2-player, right? Like there's so many of those sales out there. They're floating around. You guys can see that.
I just want to say, I don't know who's buying Premier limited starter deck like blocks. Like that feels to me like one of the least interesting products to own. But
that's funny you say that, because Mark and I both got this last quarter.
I'm sorry.
No, they were like really cheap. And so hopped on that. Go to the next slide, which is my last one. I just wanted to say here, in terms of just some final notes, some really low sales over the last quarter, like Hoth for $405 at open auction. on June 9th. That's the lowest we've seen in a couple years. A Premier Unlimited booster went for $153 yesterday. That was on eBay Canada, but it was accessible on eBay US as well. It just would have like converted it. So maybe people were turned off by shipping to the US here, but still $153 for an unlimited box is very, very low. Daaba Revised seems to be doing much worse than Daaba Limited, which is interesting when you talk about sets, like revised sets, especially for Hoth and Daaba, actually seem to be doing better probably than the limited ones. But I bought a box put on eBay, or someone put on the Facebook group for $300, and I was like, I'm jumping on that. That seems like a reasonable price. And then Jabba's Palace went for $150 yesterday as well. Best offer. It was listed at $200 on eBay. And so like that box is definitely trending down for sure. Jabba's Palace. And then the one I talked about, Reflections 3, the 2100, that somebody just was like, yep, I'm making an offer. And guess what? I saved $1,000 basically for doing that, as well as the Endor box. So that is the sealed stuff.
I would have bought that box. Just gonna say.
It's funny. Cam asked me privately, he's like, can you set up an alert to like send me messages when I have like sealed product go on sale? These are so low that I need to hop on these now. Yeah.
All right, Mark, close us out with some graded chat.
All right. So these guys went above and beyond with their slides, and I made one slide with 2 pictures on it here. So we've got for the graded cards. So instead of Luke was covering the sealed, this is for just the single graded card sales. On the left is the chart of the number of graded card sales by quarter, and on the right is the total US dollar of the graded card sales by quarter. And you can see on the very right, we have the newest data point for 2024 Q2 for both, and it looks like probably very slightly down from last quarter from both the number of graded card sales as well as the total US dollar of sales, but kind of still keeping with the general like overall trend of increasing over time. It's a little noisy to say like, well, is it meaningful that it's down? I'm not entirely certain. It seems like it's just kind of continuing the trend of the larger trend line of up over time. But maybe we'll see more next quarter to see whether it continues to go slightly up or maybe a little bit down. And the future is always uncertain, as Yoda said.
I'll also hop in just quickly to say, because I run the graded tracker as well, that May was a blockbuster month for graded. It was the highest volume, like total amount of sales in US dollars that we've ever seen on graded side of things. It did, as Mark obviously alluded to, like in the quarter data, it did drop a little bit around that time. So like this past month was a little less. April was a little less than it previously had been, but May itself was really, really strong. And so that was interesting to see as well.
Fascinating discussion, guys. All right, so I have a few questions to kind of wrap stuff up. The first one is, do you see any sort of bigger macro trends happening in 2024? What I see happening in the card market is there's continuing to be a concentration in ultra rares, AIs, enchanted, serialized, whatever it is. Like if you can find a way of slicing and adding a level of collectability, which essentially is what graded is, I think there's going to be more and more people that are attracted to that. And so like that's one of my big takeaways is I think that even for these dead games, if you can find like the AIs, the ultra rares, the stuff that is going to continue to be hard to find because of increased rarity, people are going to chase it more. And that's like a natural thing. But I think we've seen this like hyper collectability movement that's happened recently with like serialized cards in particular, or surge foils or alternative art or borderless. What do you want to do? But it's just like a cash cow. So I can see that just sort of creeping into this market as well. But anyone else have any kind of thoughts on sort of the macro trends in this game or more broadly kind of the card market? Luke, I'll start with you because you're to my right.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's interesting. The collectability part and graded, especially taking off for the last few years, I can see like, and as someone who had put together an English master set a long time ago and stopped collecting and got out of it. Now it's about uncut sheets, as you guys know for me. But like the one card that I bought from Star Wars CCG recently was Master Luke PSA 10. Like Master Luke was my forum handle for a very long time. It's like my eBay username, and that draw me back in. And I was like, all right, I want this one thing, which is a really hard thing. It's like a population, I don't know, 4 card at the moment. So yeah, I don't know. I like that as an idea of like what is pulling people in to this market. It's like, it's hard. Star Wars CCG for sure with graded is a difficult proposition that Mark could obviously speak to with his expertise, but like, it's just a really challenging thing to like collect at that level, at high level graded stuff. And so I could see that maybe being a part of what is pulling people and drawing people in.
Anyone else from the Greg and Mark side?
Nothing to add on my end.
All right. Well, what about, I kind of have one more question here. New IP. We are, I think, on episode 4 of The Acolyte here, and I think it is not well loved, or some people love it, some people hate it, but I think it's this general thing I've been thinking about is what is the impact of new intellectual property on these games? Is it all kind of good? Like, people think they don't like this show, they wish it was more like the movies, and they're like, oh, let me go check this stuff out again. Like, what do you think the impact is on actually having like living IP? So I mean, I also talk about Lord of the Rings on this channel, and like there's been a surge with the Rings of Power, with this like Riders of Rohan anime coming out. So there's been like a almost like a drumbeat of content, and Disney's been doing this since whatever 2016, and it's alienated a lot of people, but it's also kept people engaged. So I'm just kind of curious if you guys have any thoughts on sort of, is all IP good IP, even if it's bad? That makes a lot of sense.
Well, if you're talking about the health of the Star Wars CCG as a collectible, I think any continuation, even if people, it doesn't meet the criteria, their checklist of like, well, it has to be, if it doesn't check this, it's not Star Wars. I think anything really is good, because if you have nothing, I mean, it's like Star Trek, Star Trek doesn't have nearly the continuation of the IP that Star Wars has. And I don't know if you guys recall, or the viewers recall, or listeners, but in the 90s, Star Trek CCG was actually, I think, a decent amount more expensive as far as the singles and the sets were concerned than Star Wars. And we've kind of seen the reversal in terms of the popularity of the IPs. And yeah, I think the continuation of the IP is good for this card game, just because it's in the site. What's the phrase I'm looking for? Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah. I mean, it's the experience of like modernity, where like attention spans are short, and we're all constantly jumping from one thing to the other, and it's really hard to have like long-term interest in a universe, right? This is why like Game of Thrones came back with House of the Dragon, and now they're pumping a bunch of new stuff into this universe to try to keep it alive, because people just forgot about it, even if they're obsessed with it for 8 seasons. Yeah, I think that's a good insight there. I think Star Trek's an interesting one, because I've heard Picard's good, but it's on Peacock Premium or whatever it's Paramount Plus, and like, like, I will never get that. I will just never get Premium or whatever, Paramount Plus. If any of you guys have an account, we can talk later, because I would like to watch Picard. But okay, kind of last question. What cards or sets do you see with the most potential or upside? Props to anyone who called Daaba boxes going up. I don't think I'll have to check the tapes to see if anyone had that as their prediction for the next quarter. But I guess I'll go first with my prediction. Is I think Hoth, even though it's high, I think Hoth is just a cool set that people are going to continue to go to. And so I'm going to say Hoth is the one. That's just kind of a random picking it out of a hat, I feel like. But anyone else here? I'll go to Luke first.
Yeah, I think Cloud City is my answer. I think the price of the box sets there's 60 packs, right? In each box. And some of the mains there that especially you could grade, like a graded Boba Fett sells really well. But you have Captain Han Solo, you have Princess Leia, you have Lando, both light and dark. There's a lot of red cards in Cloud City too, but like they're bang for your buck. Cloud City is way better in terms of like a box than Jabba's Palace. And so like if that, and those are like the cheapest boxes you can get, aside maybe from some like one-off premieres, because premiere just sells so much. But like I would say Cloud City would be the set that I would point to of like, oh yeah, there seems to be some value there. Although just buying sealed boxes to rip, probably not the best value proposition.
Yeah, at a certain point though, it's whatever 280 or something,
Yeah.
60 packs, $4 a pack,
That's right.
450
Yeah.
a pack. Kind of MSRP almost. Like I
Yeah.
mean, for like a modern game. Greg, what about you? Do you have any kind of what's your biggest upside?
I don't know that I have a good thought on this. So instead, I'm going to go back to your last question and just say this really quickly. The way, your interest in the question was sort of thinking about like, what is the impact of new IP on like the market or bringing people to the game? And I think this, of course, that's an interesting question that I also think about. But there's another side of that, which is whether I like or dislike the new IP, I'm always thinking, ooh, what are the new cards going to be in the next virtual set, right? So for those who are already embedded in it, whether you're super into it or whether you're not, I think it's always fun to think about like card possibilities, characters, interrupts, or just general themes. I think, there's always fun stuff to come out of new IP.
No, that's a really good point. Like just witches or whatever they're going to do with this. Like, oh, like this is interesting to think about cults, like a cult,
Yeah.
theme or keyword or something.
There's a new objective coming our way.
Yeah, right. It's going to be like a witches over like a pot, like creating a force baby. Mark, what about you?
So I'm having a little bit of difficulty coming up with a hot take. So maybe I'll start with a colder take first and see if I can think of a hot take along the way. So looking at those steel prices, for example, and with the overall trend in the last few years, let's say towards graded and collectability, now you have Star Wars Unlimited, which is a lot of fun to pull, and people are, grading those with all the chase cards and whatnot. I feel like you said earlier, that it's really hard to come by mint condition cards that are just in someone's binder or in someone's collection somewhere. So I really do think sealed, I think will pick up maybe compared to the other potential card options in Star Wars CCG, if you will. Maybe coming from that, maybe a somewhat hot take, although it's really not that hot of a take, is because again we have Star Wars Unlimited is the fancy shiny toy at the moment, and modern collectors like shiny things. So I think again, when you have a lot of players in Star Wars CCG, people tend to prefer the non-foils. But I think for folks like those who are interested in collecting, we may see another uptick in foils versus non-foils. So maybe that's my semi warm take there.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think people interested in Star Wars cards, like the amount of people I've seen talking with like Star Wars Limited groups, like this is the first time I've ever played a CCG. And same with Lorcana. Like I think that these new IPs are bringing people away from Magic to a degree, but they're also bringing them into like the idea that you can enjoy having a whatever 3-inch by 2-inch card that you think is worth $150, right? Like that's a pretty hard point to get to of collecting small pieces of cardboard with other people's faces on it and be like, no, this is very valuable. And so like you got to like kind of get a card pilled or something here.
The foil that makes it worth a lot,
Right. Yeah. It's like, oh, it's shiny and it has some squiggly marks and therefore it's worth a lot of money. But I think it's been a really fun hobby. I'm super happy to have this kind of community here. This is the part where I say nice things and thank you guys. But any kind of final thoughts from anybody in the group on this Q2 wrapping up? It's summer. I don't want to be outside. I'm going to spend a lot of time inside organizing my belongings. Well, if no one has anything, we'll sign off there. And as I said at the beginning, all this stuff, all the links, a bunch of goodies are all in the show notes. The view more, you can check it all out. We want this to be transparent of what we're looking at and what we're talking about. But that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for hanging out, everybody, and we'll see you later.